Hey guys, welcome back. It's Coach K with another ID sketch video. And this week we're going to be looking at transparency and reflection. And I'll be using a pair of ski goggles to get the point across. So stay tuned. I'll be right back. All right, so here we go. Got a pair of ski goggles, as I mentioned, and what I really love about ski goggles and the design of them is the fact that you can you can really explore your concept by not only the outside of the product, but you're also looking through, and there are elements in this case like foam padding and insulation that goes in. That's a big integral part of the design. And so what I like to do is, just starting off, is particularly in Sketchbook, I use the predictive stroke, and so that's going to allow me to make uh, simple strokes and lines, and it auto corrects, right? So it really makes kind of a nice gestural stroke. And so a lot of my early rough thumbnails, I'll use predictive stroke quite a bit actually. So I can use it as an underlay. As you see right here, I lowered the opacity, and now I'm going to go back in with a new layer, and I'm going to start some of the more detailed work that ultimately will go into the sketch render. So you can see here it's a little bit cleaner, a little bit tighter, and I've added some kind of that triangular texture, both top and bottom, and that's actually going to be hidden behind the lens. And so I'm going to show you kind of in the menu, the layer menu structure here, how to organize and group things. And basically I've done it by category, and when I say category, I mean by the, if it's part of the frame, or if it's part of the lens, or the foam, the foam padding. There's different layers to that. So, but really, what you want to do, and really as a common practice, is to bring your, or have your line drawing there, but then you want to lock it and you want to duplicate it. So you always preserve at least one copy of your original line work. And I'll show you why in just a second, why that's important. But now I'm already thinking about where my light source is going to be, and kind of how I want to manipulate the reflection and the transparency of that lens. That's a big part of this sketch render. So what I'd like to do, knowing that I'm going to be spending a lot of time on the lens and what's behind it, I want to go in and this is a little trick. It's kind of like Photoshop. One thing I don't like about Sketchbook is the fact that you can't really save selections or save paths like you can in Photoshop. And so, or I should say, at least I haven't figured out how to yet. And so what I've done here is I've gone in with the magic wand, which behaves just like Photoshop, and selected the areas that comprise the lens. Although when you look closely there, you can see that it doesn't select the lines, right? And you can adjust the fidelity there, but it's such a fine thing. It's sometimes difficult to do. So what I'm doing now is just kind of cleaning up the selection. So things that the magic wand didn't grab, like the lines, I'll go and I'll add to the selection, or in some cases I'll subtract from the selection. What I want to do is make it kind of like a clipping mask in Photoshop. So, and this will be something that I can refer back to. So I've got my main selection, as you can see here, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to do a bucket fill, just a solid bucket fill. So that defines that whole area, and that's on a separate layer now. And I'll go back to that layer several times. And if you do the transparency lock, then you can do things like this gradient, radial gradient, uh, just right on that page. Excuse me, right on that layer. And so that's really handy as well. But if you keep duplicating those layers, right? Well, here I'm adjusting the opacity levels to get to where I can still see through the object or see through the lens. And but now that original mask layer, I even named the layer mask 1 and 2, but I'll always have that for a reference. I can always go in and select it as I've done here with the magic wand. And all the little areas that you see through the lens, the foam padding, a portion of the band is visible, and then there's other layers of plastic that will be visible too. So now what I can do is go back to my mask layer, I can select it, and then I can go in and deselect the areas that that I don't want to render. So I can essentially create my own paths very quickly. And I'm sure there's other ways to do it. It's like I always tell my students, I taught myself, and so this is kind of how I do it. And if you have a better way, please let me know. I'll be happy to hear about all the various alternatives out there, how to do things. But here you can see how I've deselected and created that. So as I go in with my design, the orange represents a piece of plastic that's behind the lens. So it's going to be in my menu structure. It's going to be below the lens. If you look on the right-hand side, you can see that. And so now I'm just adding in other layers, right? So I'm pointing out right now the lines underneath. And although I really like to maintain a lot of line drawings, if I've duplicated my line layer, then I have the freedom to go in and start deleting some of the lines that delineate areas that maybe I want a highlight to be on. So it's hard to put that highlight on top of a line. And so, simply erase it and you're good to go. So you can see that I've also added as a reflection those tree limbs. And so I frequently go to pixels.com, and because it's all license-free photography and video. And so I simply went in and kind of searched under snow scenes because of, their ski goggles, obviously. And so kind of scrolling down through, the hard part is just, there's probably 100 I could use in here. That would be great. But you can see off to the right, there's the picture that I used. And so I'm just going to download that and bring it into my drawing here. You can do an add image, or at the very top of the menu structure, the layer menu, I should say, you can add, there's an icon for adding right there, adding the image that way. So I'm bringing it in now, and you can see obviously I need to scale it down quite a bit and move it around. And I don't know if you guys can hear that outside of my studio, but that is the ice cream man. So our pipes froze basically all last week, and now it's 75 degrees outside and the ice cream man is back. So pardon the interruption there. So, but as you can see here now, I'm going back to my mask layer. I'm going to select it. And then what I need to do is I need to invert my selection, because I want to delete everything outside of what is the lens of those goggles. So then I can go in, and again, I can play with the opacity level and figure out exactly kind of how strong I want that reflection to be. I don't want it to be overly distracting, and that can happen very easily. So there's also a little highlight layer that I added for the lens on the lower right. And but the beauty is just being able to adjust the opacity. And that's why I can work really fast and not be overly preoccupied with the trying to fine tune it on the spot, because I'll do that. I'll do a lot of fine tuning at the end. Sometimes I'll even take my sketches into Photoshop for certain things like adding text. I like the text feature in Photoshop better than I do Sketchbook, but you can see here all the various layers. Like here now, working with the band, and I found a texture, kind of like a fabric texture that I really like. So I'm throwing that in there, and also playing with the foam. I probably have 4 or 5 different layers grouped, all representing various areas of the foam. So I would go into each one of those little layers and do a straight bucket fill, and then drop the opacity to the levels that I want. Because just like in a fine art painting of a landscape, the furthest away in the scene, the lighter it gets. The closer it is to the viewer, the darker things are. And so I'm using that same principle really to adjust the depth of that. So finally, at the end here, I'm just adding a little context, because I thought it would be really kind of nice to accentuate and further kind of amplify the product and its use. And so that's really it. Hope you enjoyed it.